When Garrett Sullivan accidentally sent a flirty text meant for his dating app match to the CEO of the pharmaceutical company holding his dying daughter's last hope for survival, he expected lawyers' lawsuits, maybe even a restraining order. What he didn't expect was Sutton Westbrook herself standing on his doorstep 3 hours later, designer heels clicking against his cracked concrete porch, demanding to know why her company had buried his child's case 3 times. One wrong number, one desperate father, one woman powerful enough to save a life or destroy the man begging for mercy. The Tuesday started like every other Tuesday had for the past 4 years badly. Garrett stood in the CVS pharmacy pickup line at 3:17 in the afternoon, juggling 5 prescription bottles for Bryn in one hand while his phone buzzed insistently in the other. The rejection letter from Meridian Therapeutics had arrived that morning, their third in 4 months. Each one identical in its clinical detachment. We regret to inform you that your daughter does not meet the eligibility criteria for Protocol 7 at this time. No explanation beyond that single sentence. No appeal process mentioned. Just a door slamming shut on the last viable treatment option for common variable immunodeficiency disorder that hadn't already failed his 8-year-old daughter. 4 years of this. 4 years since the diagnosis that should have brought relief, finally a name for why Bryn kept getting sick, but instead brought only the crushing knowledge of what was killing his child. $43,000 in medical debt. A bankruptcy filing last year just to keep the collection agencies from garnishing what little freelance income his graphic design work brought in. An ex-wife who'd walked out when Bryn was 2 because being a single mother, she'd said with chilling clarity, wasn't aligned with her life goals. 6 years without a word from her. 6 years of Garrett doing this alone, and the weight of it sat heavy in his chest cavity like something with actual mass. The dating app had been his neighbor's idea. You need something normal in your life, Garrett. Something that isn't hospital bills and treatment schedules. Just try it. And because the loneliness sometimes felt like its own terminal diagnosis, he'd tried. Jessica from the app seemed kind. She'd mentioned having a kid and hadn't immediately unmatched when he'd admitted the same. 3 days of messaging back and forth, each one making him feel like maybe, just maybe, there was still room in his catastrophically complicated life for something approaching normal. He'd spent 20 minutes crafting the text message, trying to strike that impossible balance between self-deprecating and charming, between honest about his circumstances and not so honest that he scared her off before they'd even met. The pharmacy line inched forward. His thumb hovered over the send button. The message read, "You're way too smart and beautiful to be wasting time on a broke single dad, but I'm really glad you're giving me a chance anyway. Friday night, I promise I clean up better than my profile picture suggests." He hit send while shouldering through the pharmacy door, already 12 minutes late, to pick Bryn up from school. The response came 4 minutes later as he was buckling into his car. Garrett's stomach dropped through the floorboard before he'd finished reading the first line. "I don't recall us having plans for Friday or any communication prior to this message. This number belongs to Sutton Westbrook, CEO of Meridian Therapeutics. I believe you have the wrong contact." The phone nearly slipped from his hands. His vision tunneled. That couldn't be right. He scrolled frantically through his recent messages, through his contacts list, trying to understand how this had happened. How he could possibly have, oh God, yesterday. Yesterday he'd saved the main Meridian contact number after the third rejection letter arrived. He'd been so angry, so desperate that he'd typed out a dozen furious texts he'd never sent, venting his rage at the faceless corporation that kept slamming doors in Bryn's face. He must have accidentally saved some executive's direct line instead of the general inquiry number. And just now, distracted and rushed and thinking about something other than survival, for the first time in weeks, he'd pulled up what he thought was Jessica's contact and the phone buzzed again. "Garrett Sullivan, I presume? Your daughter Bryn Sullivan, patient ID MT2847S. The one we've rejected from trial protocol 7 3 times in the past 4 months." She knew. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company knew exactly who he was. Garrett's hands started shaking hard enough that he had to set the phone on his lap. What could he possibly say? "Sorry for sexually harassing you while begging for my kid's life." There was no coming back from this. He'd just torpedoed Bryn's last chance at the only treatment that might save her, and for what, a dating app message to a woman he'd never even met. The next text made his vision blur. "What's your address?" This had to be a trap. CEOs of major pharmaceutical companies didn't just ask for your address. They sent cease and desist letters. They had their legal teams destroy you. They, Mr. Sullivan, your address. Now his thumbs moved before his brain could stop them typing out the address of the small rental house in Riverside he shared with Bryn. The place with the leaking bathroom faucet he couldn't afford to fix, and the front porch that desperately needed new boards, and the backyard where Bryn used to play before she got too sick to run around anymore. The house that screamed poverty and failure and everything he couldn't give his daughter. Stay there, I'm coming to you. Garrett sat in his car for a solid minute, unable to process what was happening. Then he looked at the clock, 3:31 p.m., and realized he was now officially late picking Bryn up from school. He started the engine with numb fingers navigating afternoon traffic on autopilot, while his mind raced through increasingly catastrophic scenarios. By the time he pulled into the school pickup line, he'd convinced himself that Sutton Westbrook was driving to his house right now to personally serve him with a restraining order, possibly with police escort. Bryn was waiting at the curb, her frozen backpack nearly as big as she was. 8 years old but tiny for her age, the illness and treatments keeping her smaller than her classmates. Her hair, once thick and curly like his, had thinned from prolonged malnutrition and stress, not from the IVIG infusions themselves, but from years of her body fighting a war it couldn't win. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, circles no child should have. But when she saw his car, her face lit up with the kind of pure joy that made his heart simultaneously soar and shatter. She climbed into the back seat, struggling a bit with the seatbelt until he reached back to help her click it. Her voice bubbled with excitement as she settled in. Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons, Daddy? That's more moons than any other planet. Miss Peterson said it's because Jupiter is so big and has such strong gravity. Can you imagine having 79 moons? We only have one, and it already controls all our tides and everything. The normalcy of it, his daughter chattering about astronomy while he was in the middle of destroying both their lives, made something crack open in Garrett's chest. He responded with appropriate, interested noises, asking questions about her day, listening to her describe an art project and a book they'd read, and an argument between two boys at recess about who was faster. Normal 8-year-old concerns delivered in Bryn's slightly breathy voice, the one that came from lungs that had to work too hard. As they pulled into their driveway, she stopped mid-sentence. Whose car is that? A sleek black sedan sat on the street in front of their house, the kind that cost more than Garrett made in 3 years. His throat closed up. We have a visitor, a lady from the medicine company we've been talking to. Bryn's eyes went wide and he watched hope war with practiced disappointment on her small face. The trial people? Yeah, baby, but remember what we talked about. Her voice went flat in a way that made his heart crack clean through. Don't get my hopes up, I remember. The 14 minutes between Sutton's text and her arrival had felt like 14 seconds. Garrett had managed to shove most of the toys into the already overflowing toy box, grab armfuls of clean laundry off the couch, and kick Bryn's light-up sneakers under the coffee table. But the house was still a disaster. Dishes in the sink, medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter like an accusation. Crayon drawings stuck to the walls with tape because he couldn't afford frames. The detritus of a life spent in crisis management mode with no bandwidth for anything else. When the doorbell rang at 6:32 p.m., 3 hours and 15 minutes after his catastrophic text, Garrett briefly considered not answering, just hiding in his own house like a coward until she went away. But the doorbell rang again, more insistent this time, and he forced his feet to move toward the door. He pulled it open. Sutton Westbrook stood on his porch, and seeing her in person was nothing like the polished corporate headshot on Meridian's website. She was tall, easily 5'9" in heels that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, a charcoal gray suit that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her body, which it probably had. Eyes the color of winter storms currently fixed on him with an intensity that made him want to apologize for existing. She looked like power incarnate, like someone who could destroy his life with a phone call. Her voice came out crisp, professional, utterly devoid of warmth, even though he obviously knew who she was. Sutton Westbrook, may I come in? It wasn't really a question. Garrett stepped aside and she walked into his living room with the same confidence she probably brought to boardrooms and shareholder meetings. Those storm gray eyes swept across the space, taking in the mismatched furniture from Goodwill, The crayon drawings, the pile of medical bills, he'd been avoiding the scattered picture books and stuffed animals that marked this as a home where a sick child lived. The words stumbled out before he could stop them. I apologize for the mess. If I'd known you were coming, I would have. Where's your daughter? The question cut through his fumbling apology like a blade. He glanced at the kitchen clock. She's still at school. I have to pick her up in 20 minutes. Sutton nodded once, sharp and efficient. Then she turned those relentless eyes back on him, and Garrett felt pinned like a specimen under glass. The text you sent me, that was genuinely an accident. Yes. The word came out strangled. I'm so sorry. I was trying to message someone from a dating app. I saved your company's number yesterday after the last rejection, and I must have clicked the wrong contact, and I swear I didn't mean to. She interrupted him, her voice still clinical, but with an edge now. Rejected 3 times. For a trial that has open enrollment spots. It wasn't a question, but Garrett nodded anyway, not trusting his voice. Protocol 7, the immune restoration trial for pediatric primary immunodeficiency disorders. We currently have 47 participants enrolled out of a maximum capacity of 80. There are 33 open spots. Your daughter was rejected 3 times despite meeting the preliminary criteria outlined in our public documentation. The words hit Garrett like physical blows, each one landing with precision. He reached out, gripping the back of his second-hand couch to steady himself. I don't understand. They said she didn't qualify. They said the selection committee reviewed her case, and the selection committee is a formality. Sutton pulled out her phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced speed. The real approvals happen at the executive level, which means someone specifically blocked your daughter's enrollment. The room tilted. Garrett's vision grayed at the edges. Why would anyone do that? She's 8 years old, she has CVID, and she's been in the hospital 6 times this year, and the immunoglobulin treatments aren't working anymore, and we're running out of... His voice cracked. He couldn't finish the sentence. Running out of time. Running out of options. Running out of hope. Sutton's eyes hadn't left her phone screen, but something in her posture had shifted. Something tighter, more contained. That's what I intend to find out. But first I need you to tell me about Bryn. Not the medical file, not the lab results, or the diagnostic codes. I need you to tell me who she is. Of all the things Garrett had expected from this encounter, threats, legal action, maybe even police, this wasn't it. He stared at her, this powerful stranger in his kitchen, asking about his daughter like she actually mattered. Like Bryn was more than just a patient number in a database. He swallowed hard, trying to find words. I don't know what you want me to... Start with the basics. Sutton finally looked up from her phone, and something in her expression had shifted. Not softened exactly, but open, like she'd unlocked a door she usually kept bolted shut. How old was she when she was diagnosed? 4. The memory still hurt even 4 years later. She kept getting sick. Ear infections, pneumonia, sinus infections that wouldn't clear up no matter how many antibiotics they threw at her. Our pediatrician kept saying it was normal, that some kids just have weaker immune systems. But I knew something was wrong. A father knows. Sutton nodded, and Garrett found himself continuing, the words spilling out like a dam had broken. It took 9 months to get the diagnosis. 9 months of watching her miss birthday parties and school field trips because she was too sick to go. 9 months of sleeping in hospital chairs and learning medical terminology I never wanted to know. When they finally figured out what it was, CVID, common variable immunodeficiency, the doctor acted like we should be relieved because at least now we had a name for it. But a name doesn't change anything. It just means you know what's killing your kid. Her mother, Sutton, asked quietly. Garrett's jaw tightened, anger flaring hot and immediate in his chest. Left when Bryn was 2, decided single motherhood wasn't aligned with her life goals. I haven't heard from her in 6 years. So you've been doing this alone. The statement hung between them, and Garrett heard himself respond with more honesty than he'd intended. I've been doing what any parent would do, whatever it takes to keep my daughter alive. Something flickered across Sutton's face, recognition maybe, or understanding, but it was gone before Garrett could identify it. She turned her attention back to her phone. The IVIG treatments. Intravenous immunoglobulin. You said they're not working anymore. They were for a while. Garrett felt exhausted, suddenly bone-deep weary from years of fighting this fight. Bryn would get her infusions every 3 weeks, and she'd be okay for a bit. Not normal, but okay. But over the past year, the infections have been getting worse, more frequent, harder to treat. Last month, she developed pneumonia that put her in the ICU for 5 days. The pulmonologist said if we can't get her immune system under control, the next serious infection could... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the possibility that lived in his nightmares. Sutton's expression had gone carefully neutral, but Garrett saw her fingers tighten around her phone. Your income, the blunt question made him flinch, but he answered anyway. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I work from home so I can be here when Bryn needs me. It's not much, but it's flexible, and that matters more than money right now. Annual heat crawled up Garrett's neck. Maybe 35,000 in a good year. This hasn't been a good year. Insurance marketplace plan. High deductible. I've hit my out-of-pocket maximum every year since Bryn was diagnosed. He gestured toward the kitchen counter where the pile of medical bills sat like an indictment of his failures. I'm about 43,000 in debt. I had to file for bankruptcy last year just to keep the collectors from garnishing my wages. Not that there's much to garnish. He waited for judgment for the disdain that usually followed these admissions. People loved to offer opinions about fiscal responsibility when they'd never had to choose between rent and medication. But Sutton just nodded, still typing on her phone, her face unreadable. The trial applications. Walk me through the rejection process. Garrett felt something shift in the room, a subtle change in the air that suggested this conversation was about to go somewhere he couldn't predict. He took a breath and began. I filled out the preliminary form online the first time back in February. Got an automated response saying they'd review Bryn's case and get back to me within 2 weeks. 3 weeks later, I got an email saying she didn't meet the eligibility criteria. No explanation beyond that. And the second application, April. Garrett could recite the timeline from memory. Now each rejection burned into his brain. I called the patient liaison office first this time, explained Bryn's situation, asked what criteria she'd failed to meet. They said they couldn't discuss specific cases, but encouraged me to reapply if her condition had changed. So I did. Same result. Generic rejection, no details. The third time last month. Garrett's hands curled into fists at his sides, the old anger flooding back. I was desperate by then. I drove to your company's headquarters in San Diego, asked to speak to someone in person about Bryn's case. Security wouldn't let me pass the lobby. I left a folder with all her medical records, test results, everything. Begged them to just look at it. 2 weeks later, another rejection email. Sutton had stopped typing. She was staring at her phone screen with an expression Garrett couldn't quite read, something between fury and horror. What? His voice came out sharper than he intended. What is it, your final appeal hearing? It's scheduled for tomorrow, 2 p.m. Yeah. Garrett's chest constricted with the familiar weight of impending loss. Last chance. If they reject her again, that's it. There's no other trial that matches her diagnosis. No other options. Who's conducting the hearing, I don't know. The email just said it would be reviewed by the Program Oversight Committee. Sutton's jaw clenched, and when she spoke, her voice had gone ice cold. The Oversight Committee is 3 people. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, head of clinical trials, Dr. James Mitchell, pediatric immunology specialist, and Thorne Ashford, board member and program administrator. The way she said that last name clipping, controlled like she was forcing it through her teeth, made every instinct Garrett had developed over 4 years of fighting for his daughter's life suddenly scream danger. Is there a problem with, I need to see Bryn's file? Sutton cut him off, and there was something new in her voice now, something sharp and dangerous. Everything you have, medical records, test results, the rejection letters, all of it. It's in my car. I was going to review it tonight before tomorrow's hearing. Garrett moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. Why are you doing this? You don't know us. I sent you an accidental text message, and now you're here asking about my daughter's medical history. This doesn't make sense. Sutton met his eyes, and for the first time since she'd walked through his door, her professional mask slipped. What Garrett saw underneath was something raw and complicated. Anger maybe, or pain, or something that looked like both twisted together. Because 33 open spots means 33 children who could be in that trial right now aren't. And if your daughter was deliberately excluded, I need to know why. I need to know who decided her life was disposable. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications Garrett was afraid to examine too closely. He went to his car and retrieved the overstuffed folder he'd been carrying around for weeks, the one that contained every piece of paper documentation of Bryn's illness. When he came back inside, Sutton had moved to his kitchen table, clearing a space among the breakfast dishes he hadn't had time to wash that morning. She took the folder without comment and started going through it with the focused intensity of someone conducting a criminal investigation. Medical records, lab reports, the 3 rejection letters, each one identically vague. Prescription histories, insurance claims, the documentation of 4 years spent fighting a system that seemed designed to grind families like his into dust. Garrett watched her for a minute, this stranger in his kitchen, this powerful woman who'd shown up at his door because of a wrong number and was now reading his daughter's entire medical history like it mattered, like Bryn mattered. I need to get Bryn from school. The clock on the microwave read 6:47. He was now spectacularly late. Are you staying? Sutton didn't look up from the papers. Yes, okay. Garrett grabbed his keys, then hesitated at the door. She doesn't know about tomorrow's hearing. I haven't told her because I didn't want to get her hopes up again. So if you could just, I won't say anything. Right, okay. He was halfway to the door when Sutton's voice stopped him. Mr. Sullivan? He turned back. The text you sent me. She was still looking at Bryn's file, her voice carefully neutral. You said you clean up better than your profile picture suggests. That implies you have a profile picture somewhere. Heat flooded Garrett's face. Dating app. I know the timing is terrible with everything going on with Bryn, but my neighbor convinced me to try meeting someone, and I thought maybe if I could just have one normal thing in my life. It's not terrible, Sutton interrupted. And when her eyes finally lifted from the papers, there was something almost soft in her expression. It's human. Don't apologize for wanting something other than survival. The words settled into Garrett's chest, finding a place that had been empty for a very long time. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and headed out to get his daughter. Bryn was waiting in the after-school care room, one of only 3 kids left. The aide gave Garrett a pointed look. He was 47 minutes late, but didn't say anything. She'd been kind about his chronic lateness ever since he'd explained about Bryn's condition. Most people were once they understood. Once they knew he wasn't just another irresponsible parent, but a man trying to hold together a life that kept threatening to fall apart. I'm sorry, baby. Traffic was bad. The lie came easily after years of practice. Bryn didn't need to know that traffic wasn't the problem, that the CEO of the pharmaceutical company holding her fate was currently sitting in their kitchen, reading through her medical history for reasons Garrett still didn't fully understand. Bryn's hand found his as they walked to the car, her grip warm and trusting. She chattered about an argument during recess about whether dragons were real and how she'd told the other kids that even if dragons weren't real now, they could have been in the past before they went extinct like dinosaurs. Her scientific reasoning was impeccable, and Garrett felt pride bloom in his chest despite the anxiety currently trying to strangle him. When they pulled into the driveway and Bryn saw the black sedan still parked on the street, her chattering stopped mid-sentence. She's still here. The wonder in Bryn's voice made Garrett's throat close up. In her experience, important people didn't stick around. Her mother had left. Doctors discharged her from hospitals as soon as possible. Insurance companies rejected claims. Important people went away, and Bryn had learned to expect abandonment even from those who promised to stay. Let's go see what she's doing, okay? Remember best behavior. I always have best behavior. Bryn's indignation was genuine enough to make Garrett smile despite everything. They walked inside together, Bryn's small hand still in his, and found Sutton exactly where Garrett had left her, still at the kitchen table. But now the papers were organized into neat stacks, and she was typing rapidly on her laptop, her expression grim with concentration. She looked up when they entered, and something in her face changed. Garrett saw it happen, the careful professional distance she'd maintained shattering like glass when her eyes landed on Bryn. It was there and gone in an instant, but Garrett caught it, recognition, pain, something personal and devastating. You must be Bryn. Sutton's voice was gentler than Garrett had heard it yet. Bryn pressed closer to his side, suddenly shy. Yes, ma'am. It's nice to meet you. I'm Sutton. She closed her laptop, giving Bryn her full attention in a way that felt both natural and practiced, like she was used to commanding rooms but chose to focus on this one small person instead. Your dad tells me you learned about Jupiter today. Bryn perked up slightly, the mention of her favorite subject overriding her shyness. It has 79 moons. That's more than any other planet in our whole solar system. That is a lot of moons. Sutton agreed seriously with none of the condescension adults often brought to conversations with children. Which one would you live on if you could pick Europa? Bryn's answer came immediately. Because it has an ocean under the ice and maybe there could be fish or mermaids or something cool like that. A real smile crossed Sutton's face, small but genuine. That's an excellent choice. Very scientific reasoning. Bryn beamed and Garrett felt something in his chest unclench slightly. Whatever else was happening, here Sutton was good with his daughter. She saw Bryn as a person, not just a sick kid or a patient number. And that mattered more than Garrett could articulate. Sweetie, can you go wash your hands and get started on your homework? I need to talk to Ms. Westbrook about some grown-up stuff. Bryn's expression immediately shuddered. Is it about the trial? The hope and fear warring in her voice made Garrett want to punch something. Or someone. Specifically, whoever at Meridian Therapeutics had decided his daughter's life wasn't worth saving. Yeah, baby, it is. Okay. Bryn headed toward the bathroom, then paused in the doorway, looking back at Sutton. Ms. Westbrook? Yes. Are you going to say no again? The question hung in the air, devastating in its simplicity. An 8-year-old asking a stranger if she was about to become another person who failed her. Another adult who made promises the world couldn't keep. Sutton stood up from the table and walked over to where Bryn stood. She crouched down so they were at eye level and Garrett started to intervene. This was his daughter, his responsibility to protect from more disappointment. But something in Sutton's posture stopped him. I'm going to find out why you were told no before. Her voice was quiet but certain, each word weighted with intention. And I'm going to fix it. That's a promise. Adults make promises all the time. Bryn's weary wisdom hit like a physical blow. They don't always keep them. You're right, they don't, but I keep mine always. Bryn studied her for a long moment, those two old eyes searching Sutton's face for truth. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded once and headed off to wash her hands. Sutton stood up slowly and Garrett saw her hand shaking slightly before she clenched it into a fist. He moved to the kitchen, putting on a pot of the discount brand coffee he bought in bulk while Sutton settled back at the table. You found something in her file. It wasn't a question, but Sutton nodded anyway. These are the digital footprints of Bryn's application submissions. Every time you submitted, there should be a standard review process, preliminary screening, medical evaluation, committee assessment, final decision. It usually takes 2 to 3 weeks. Garrett leaned closer, studying the screen, even though most of the technical details meant nothing to him. Okay, all 3 of Bryn's applications were flagged for immediate rejection within 6 hours of submission. No medical evaluation, no committee assessment. Someone with executive override access took one look at her name and killed the application before it ever reached the people who were supposed to review it. The coffee pot beeped sharp and insistent in the sudden silence. Garrett poured 2 cups with hands that had gone numb, his brain struggling to process what Sutton was telling him. The word came out, rough, scraped, raw. Who would do that? Sutton's jaw tightened in a way that suggested she already knew the answer and hated it. The override code used belongs to Thorne Ashford. The board member? The one you mentioned before, yes. Garrett handed her a mug, their fingers brushing briefly, and the contact felt like the only solid thing in a world that had started tilting sideways. Why? Why would some board member I've never met care enough about my daughter to sabotage her applications? Sutton wrapped both hands around the coffee mug like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out, even though the kitchen was stuffy from the broken AC unit Garrett couldn't afford to fix. Because Thorne Ashford is my ex-husband, and he's been using anything he can get his hands on as leverage in our divorce. Garrett sat down heavily in the chair across from her, the coffee forgotten. You're getting divorced. Divorcing. It's been contentious. Sutton's voice had gone flat, stripped of inflection. Thorne is fighting me for a larger settlement, threatening to go public with company information that could damage our stock price if I don't give him what he wants. The board is split on whether to remove him or not. It's been a nightmare. And Bryn, Garrett's voice came out, strangled, choked with a rage so pure it felt clean. My daughter is part of that. Her life is a bargaining chip in your divorce. I didn't know. Sutton met his eyes directly, and the fury in her expression was incandescent. I swear to you, I had no idea he was blocking applications. I don't personally review trial enrollments. That's not part of my role as CEO. But now that I do know, what are you going to do? Garrett demanded, leaning forward. Because if you think I'm going to just sit here while some bitter ex-husband plays games with my kid's life, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. Sutton's voice had gone hard as steel. Thursday afternoon, 48 hours from now. I need time to build the case properly, gather documentation, brief legal counsel. I'm presenting evidence of Thorne's interference in the trial selection process and moving for his immediate removal from any position with patient-facing responsibilities. Will it work? It has to. Sutton set down her coffee mug with enough force that liquid sloshed over the rim. Because I'm not letting him hurt anyone else. Not you, not Bryn, not the other children he's probably blocked for equally petty reasons. Garrett stared at this woman who'd walked into his life 3 hours ago and was now going to war for his daughter. A stranger who had no reason to care, no obligation to help, nothing to gain, except maybe revenge against an ex-husband. And yet here she sat in his kitchen, fury radiating off her in waves, talking about justice, like it was something that could actually exist in a world this fundamentally broken. Why, the question came out barely above a whisper. And don't tell me it's just about the principle of the thing. There's something else, something personal. Sutton was quiet for a long moment. In the background, Garrett could hear Bryn humming to herself while she did her homework, the sound as normal and precious as breathing, as temporary as everything good in his life seemed to be. I had a younger sister. Sutton's voice, when she finally spoke, was carefully controlled, each word measured. Elise. She died when she was 7. Primary immunodeficiency disorder, same category as Bryn's diagnosis. This was 23 years ago, before the treatments we have now existed. Before trials like Protocol 7 were even imaginable. Garrett's breath caught. Sutton, I watched her fade. Sutton continued as if he hadn't spoken, her eyes fixed on some point past his shoulder, seeing memories he couldn't access. Watch the infections take her piece by piece. Watch my parents exhaust every option, beg every doctor, try every experimental treatment anyone would let us near. Nothing worked. Nothing could work. The science just wasn't there yet. That's why you got into pharmaceuticals. That's why I built Meridian Therapeutics. The correction came swift and sharp. I wanted to create the company that could save the children we couldn't save back then. The company that would actually put patients first, that would treat every case like it mattered, like every child deserved the same chance at life regardless of their parents' bank account or insurance status. Her hands clenched on the table, knuckles going white. And now I find out my ex-husband has been using my company, Elise's legacy, to play power games, has been blocking children who should be in our program, has been letting kids like Bryn fall through the cracks for his own vendetta. The raw pain in her voice made Garrett's chest ache with recognition. This wasn't about corporate ethics or legal liability. This was personal in a way that transcended business, in a way that made her dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose except the memory of a sister who died too young. I'm going to destroy him. Sutton's voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. Not because of the divorce, not because of what he's done to me, but because he looked at your daughter's application and decided her life was worth less than whatever satisfaction he'd get from making me suffer. That's unforgivable. Before Garrett could respond, Bryn appeared in the kitchen doorway, her homework folder clutched in both hands. Daddy, I need help with my math. We're doing fractions, and I don't understand how to... She stopped, looking between Garrett and Sutton. Are you guys okay? You both look sad. Garrett forced a smile that felt like it might crack his face. We're fine, baby. Just talking about some complicated stuff. Let me see that math. He spent the next 20 minutes at the kitchen table with Bryn, walking her through fraction problems, while Sutton made phone calls in the other room. Her voice drifted through sharp and commanding. Thursday, 2 p.m. Not negotiable. I don't care if he objects. Get the lawyers on standby. Yes, I understand the optics. Do it anyway. Bryn leaned against Garrett's shoulder while they worked her weight, slight and precious. And he thought about all the homework sessions they might not get to have if tomorrow's appeal failed. All the fractions she might never learn. All the moons of Jupiter she'd never get to study in high school astronomy class. One wrong text message. That's all that had stood between Bryn and the possibility of survival. If he hadn't accidentally sent that flirty message to the CEO of the company holding his daughter's fate, he'd be sitting here right now with no idea that someone had been sabotaging them. He'd go to tomorrow's hearing and get rejected again and never know it had been rigged from the start. The thought made him physically dizzy. Sutton came back into the kitchen just as Bryn finished her last problem. Meeting set for Thursday, 2 p.m. I need to go prepare, but I'll be back tomorrow morning before your hearing. You don't have to, Garrett started, but she cut him off. Yes, I do. Bryn looked up from her homework. Are you coming back to help my dad? I'm coming back to help both of you. Will you bring me something? Bryn asked with the shamelessness of an 8-year-old who'd learned that asking for things rarely resulted in getting them, so might as well try anyway. Bryn, Garrett's mortification was immediate and complete. But Sutton laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed her entire face from stern CEO to something warmer, more human. What would you like? Bryn considered seriously. A rock from Jupiter's moon. But since that's probably too hard, maybe just a donut. I think I can manage a donut. Sutton's voice had gone solemn again, matching Bryn's gravity. She gathered her things and Garrett walked her to the door. On the porch, with evening settling in around them and the sound of Bryn singing to herself drifting from inside, Sutton paused. That text. The one you meant for your dating app match. You said you clean up well. I looked at your profile, you weren't wrong. Heat flooded Garrett's face so fast he felt lightheaded. You what? How did you? I'm a CEO of a biotech company. Finding someone's online presence isn't exactly challenging. Her lips quirked in something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. For what it's worth, Jessica seems nice. I hope it works out. That's not, Garrett stammered, completely thrown. I'm not thinking about dating right now. I have slightly more pressing concerns. Good. Sutton's expression shifted to something Garrett couldn't quite read. Because when this is over, when Bryn is healthy and stable, and you're not drowning in medical debt and crisis management, you should go on that date. You should have dinner and laugh and remember what it feels like to be something other than a father in survival mode. You deserve that. So do you. The words were out before Garrett could stop them. Sutton's expression shuddered. I'm not the one dying alone in a rental house because I'm too busy keeping my daughter alive to have a personal life. No, you're the one building a pharmaceutical empire to honor your dead sister while your ex-husband tries to burn it all down around you, which sounds equally lonely. They stared at each other in the gathering darkness, something electric and unnameable stretching between them. Finally, Sutton broke the silence. Tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. She walked to her car heels, clicking on the cracked sidewalk, and drove away into the evening. Garrett stood on his porch for a long minute, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 4 hours. This morning, he'd been a single dad with a dying daughter and no hope left. Tonight, he was a single dad with a dying daughter who somehow had the most powerful woman in pharmaceutical medicine going to war on his behalf, all because of one wrong number. Daddy, Bryn's voice called from inside. Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Yeah, baby, Garrett called back, finally moving off the porch. We can have whatever you want. He made boxed mac and cheese while Bryn chattered about her day, helped her with her bath, read her 3 chapters of the book they were working through together. Normal evening routine, normal parent-child rhythms, as if the entire trajectory of their lives hadn't just shifted on its axis. When Bryn was finally asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful in the dimness of her room, Garrett sat in his living room with his laptop and pulled up the Meridian Therapeutics website, found the corporate leadership page, looked at Sutton's professional photo, polished, powerful, giving away nothing. Then he found the archived news article from 23 years ago, Tech Executive's Daughter Dies After Battle with Rare Immune Disorder. There were photos of young Sutton at her sister's funeral, her face destroyed with grief. She couldn't have been more than 16, 17 maybe, already carrying the weight of a loss that would shape her entire life. Garrett closed his laptop and sat in the dark thinking about the strange mathematics of tragedy, how one family's devastation could become another's salvation, how Sutton had spent 2 decades building something to honor her sister's memory, only to discover it had been corrupted from within by the man she'd once married. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Board meeting Thursday concluded successfully. Thorne has been removed from all patient-facing roles, effective immediately pending full investigation. Your hearing tomorrow will be conducted by Dr. Hayes and Dr. Mitchell only. I'll be there as well in an observational capacity. Get some sleep, Mr. Sullivan. Tomorrow everything changes. Garrett stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, thank you. And it's Garrett. The response came seconds later. Get some sleep, Garrett. Friday morning arrived wrapped in the kind of California sunshine that felt like mockery. Garrett woke at 5:30 to the sound of his phone alarm, heart already racing with the knowledge of what this day meant. Bryn's final hearing. The last official chance to get her into the trial that could save her life. Except now, everything had changed in ways he still couldn't fully process. He made coffee in the pre-dawn quiet, standing at his kitchen window, watching the sky lighten from black to gray to pale gold. Somewhere across the city, Sutton Westbrook was probably awake too, preparing for a day that would determine whether all her corporate maneuvering had actually meant anything, whether removing Thorne from the approval process would be enough to undo months of deliberate sabotage. His phone buzzed at 6:15. I'm bringing breakfast. Do you have food allergies I should know about? Garrett stared at the message, still not quite able to process that this was his life now, that the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company was asking about his food allergies. No allergies. You really don't have to bring food. I promised Bryn a donut. I don't break promises. See you at 7:30. Bryn wandered into the kitchen at 7, still in her pajamas, her thinned hair sticking up at odd angles. She climbed onto Garrett's lap without a word, burrowing into his chest the way she used to when she was smaller, before the illness made her too tired for much physical affection. Her voice came out muffled against his shirt. Is today the day? Garrett's arms tightened around her small frame. Yeah, baby. Today's the day. Are you scared? The question surprised him. Bryn rarely asked about his feelings directly. She was usually so focused on being brave herself, on not making things harder for him than they already were. A little. But I'm also hopeful. More hopeful than I've been in a long time. Because of the lady Miss Westbrook, yeah. Because of her. Bryn pulled back enough to look at Ian, her brown eyes serious in a way no child's eyes should be. She's different from the other grown-ups we've talked to. She looks at me like I'm a real person, not just a sick kid. You are a real person, Bryn. You've always been a real person. I know, but lots of adults forget. She slid off his lap and disappeared into her room to get dressed, leaving Garrett alone with the weight of his daughter's accumulated wisdom. How she'd learned to read the subtle differences in how people treated her. The doctors who saw a patient number. The teachers who saw a liability. The rare few who actually saw Bryn herself. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Sutton stood on his porch in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, looking somehow both more approachable and more beautiful than she had yesterday. She carried 2 coffee cups in a carrier and a white bakery box that definitely hadn't come from any chain store. Good morning. There were shadows under her eyes that suggested she'd slept about as well as Garrett had, which was to say, not at all. Morning, come in. She set the coffee and donuts on his kitchen table just as Bryn emerged from her room wearing her favorite purple dress and the sparkly sneakers she saved for special occasions. You came back. The whole of Bryn's face lit up in a way that made Garrett's chest simultaneously expand and contract. I told you I would. Sutton opened the bakery box, revealing an assortment of donuts that definitely hadn't come from the grocery store. I wasn't sure what kind you liked, so I got several options. Bryn's eyes went wide. Are these from Sweet Boulevard? You know it. My friend Emma had her birthday party near there once, and her mom got donuts, and they were the best thing I ever ate in my whole life. Bryn looked at Garrett, clearly trying to figure out if this was a trap. Can I have one? Garrett started to say after breakfast, but Sutton cut him off. Before breakfast. Today's a special day. Special days have different rules. Bryn looked between them, calculating whether to trust this unexpected rule-breaking. When neither adult contradicted the statement, she carefully selected a chocolate donut with sprinkles and took a bite that left frosting on her nose. Garrett accepted one of the coffee cups from Sutton. It was from an actual coffee shop, not the drive-through kind, and tasted like something he couldn't afford on his best day. Thank you for all of this. The board meeting went well. Sutton kept her voice low while Bryn was distracted by her donut. Thorne's been suspended pending a full investigation into his conduct. We found evidence of at least 7 other applications he'd blocked over the past 6 months, all while slots remained open. The board was unanimous in their decision to remove him. What happens to him? That depends on what the investigation uncovers. But he won't be involved in patient care decisions ever again. I made sure of that. Bryn finished her donut and immediately started eyeing a second one. Sutton pushed the box toward her without comment. Ms. Westbrook, Bryn spoke through a mouthful of maple bar. Do you have kids? The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the kitchen. Sutton's expression didn't change, but Garrett saw her hands tighten around her coffee cup. No, I don't. Do you want kids, Bryn? Garrett's mortification was instant and complete. That's a personal question. It's okay. Sutton's voice had gone carefully neutral. I used to think I might want children someday, but my work takes up most of my time, and it's hard to imagine fitting anything else into that equation. Bryn considered this seriously. My dad works a lot too, but he always has time for me. Maybe you just need the right kid. Something flickered across Sutton's face, pain or longing or some complicated mixture of both. Maybe so. They finished breakfast in a strange, comfortable silence. The three of them sitting around Garrett's secondhand kitchen table like this was normal. Like powerful CEOs drop by with fancy donuts every morning. At 9 o'clock, Garrett's phone alarm went off the reminder to give Bryn her morning medications. He pulled out the pill organizer he'd prepared the night before, the careful arrangement of antibiotics, in supplements, in prophylactic treatments that formed the scaffolding keeping his daughter alive. Bryn took them without complaint, practiced in the routine of swallowing 17 pills twice a day. Sutton watched the process with an intensity that made Garrett self-conscious. 17 pills. Her voice was quiet after Bryn had swallowed the last one. Twice a day. Plus the weekly IVIG infusion, though, that's getting less effective. If she's admitted to the trial, the medication regimen will change significantly. The experimental treatment protocol is intense. 3 infusions per week for the first 6 weeks, then weekly maintenance doses. There are potential side effects: fatigue, nausea, headaches, temporary fever. Garrett looked at his daughter, who was building a tower out of the empty donut box, oblivious to the adult conversation happening around her. Will it hurt some? Sutton's honesty was brutal but appreciated, but less than dying. And if it works the way it's supposed to, within 6 months, her body should start producing functional antibodies on its own. She could live a normal life, go to regular school, play sports, go to birthday parties without worrying about exposure to infections. A normal life. The words felt foreign in Garrett's mouth. He'd stopped imagining that possibility months ago when it became clear the standard treatments were failing, when the future became measured in months instead of years. The hearing's at 2. Sutton checked her phone. I'm going into the office for a few hours to handle some damage control from last night's board meeting, but I'll meet you there. You really don't have to. Yes, I do. The certainty in her voice left no room for argument. She left shortly after, but the bakery box and fancy coffee cups remained on the table. Evidence that the morning hadn't been a dream. Garrett spent the rest of the morning trying to work. He had a logo design due for a client, but mostly he just stared at his computer screen and watched the clock. Bryn seemed to sense his anxiety. She was quieter than usual, staying close, asking to help with small tasks that didn't really need helping. At noon, he made them both lunch that neither of them ate. Daddy, Bryn pushed her sandwich around her plate. What happens if they say yes, then you start treatment? You get to be in the trial that might help you get better. And what happens if they say no? Garrett's throat closed. We'll figure something else out. There's always something else. But there isn't anything else, though, is there? She was 8 years old and she already understood mortality in a way no child should have to. It broke something in Garrett every time he saw that knowledge in her eyes. There's always something else. The lie tasted like ash. Always. They left for Meridian Therapeutics at 1:15, giving themselves plenty of time to navigate downtown San Diego traffic. The headquarters was a gleaming glass and steel building in the biotech district, the kind of place that screamed money and innovation and futures being built. Garrett had been here once before, the day he desperately tried to hand-deliver Bryn's application to anyone who would listen. Security had escorted him out within 15 minutes. Today they walked through the front entrance together, and the security guard at the desk looked at his list. Mr. Sullivan and Bryn Sullivan, here for the 2 o'clock hearing. Yes. Conference room B, 3rd floor. Ms. Westbrook asked that you be brought up immediately. I'll have someone escort you. They rode the elevator in silence, Bryn's small hand gripping Garrett's tightly. The 3rd floor opened onto a corridor of glass-walled conference rooms and modern office spaces. Their escort led them to a room at the end of the hall where Sutton was already waiting, along with 2 other people Garrett recognized from the research he'd done. Dr. Eleanor Hayes was a woman in her early 50s with warm brown hair streaked with gray pulled back in a low neat bun. Wire-rimmed glasses framed kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She stood when Garrett and Bryn entered. Mr. Sullivan. She extended her hand, her grip firm, and her voice carrying a subtle southern lilt. Thank you for coming, and you must be Bryn, Doctor. James Mitchell was a tall black man, probably in his early 40s, with a calm demeanor that came from years of working with sick children. He rose as well, his deep voice gentle. Why don't we all sit down? They arranged themselves around the conference table. Garrett and Bryn on one side, the two doctors across from them, Sutton at the head like she was chairing a board meeting. Someone had set out water bottles and notepads, the standard trappings of professional meetings. But there was nothing standard about this. Dr. Hayes opened a folder, Bryn's medical file, Garrett realized. I want to start by apologizing to you both. Sutton informed us this morning about the circumstances surrounding your previous application denials. What happened to you was unconscionable, and I'm deeply sorry. Garrett's response was automatic. It wasn't your fault, it was our program's fault. Dr. Mitchell's voice was firm. Our responsibility. We should have caught the irregularities in the approval process. We didn't, and that failure is on us. Garrett didn't know what to say to that. In his experience, institutions didn't apologize. They deflected, blamed procedural errors, hid behind bureaucracy. The directness of this acknowledgement left him momentarily speechless. Dr. Hayes adjusted her glasses and looked at the file in front of her. I've reviewed Bryn's complete medical history. Her diagnosis of common variable immunodeficiency is clear and well documented. Her current treatment plan with IVIG is losing effectiveness as evidenced by the increasing frequency and severity of infections over the past 12 months. She's had 6 hospital admissions this year alone. 7. Bryn's voice was quiet but clear. They took me to the hospital last week, but we left before they could admit me because Daddy said we couldn't afford another stay. Garrett felt his face burn with shame. He gambled that time treating her at home with oral antibiotics and hoping it would be enough. It had worked barely, but it could have gone catastrophically wrong. Dr. Mitchell's expression was gentle. That must have been scary. I'm used to scary. The matter-of-fact way Bryn said it made Garrett want to put his fist through something. Dr. Hayes and Dr. Mitchell exchanged a look that Garrett couldn't quite interpret. Then Dr. Hayes turned to Bryn directly. Bryn, I'd like to ask you some questions. Not medical questions, just regular questions about you. Is that okay? Bryn glanced at Garrett, who nodded. Okay. What's your favorite subject in school science? We're learning about space right now, and it's really cool. If you could do anything you wanted, anything at all with no limits, what would you do? Bryn thought about this seriously, her small face grave with concentration. I'd go to the beach, like not just visit, I'd spend the whole day there. Build sandcastles and look for shells and go in the water without worrying about getting sick from the ocean germs. That sounds wonderful. What else? I'd have a sleepover with my friends from school. I've never gotten to do that because my dad worries about exposure to infections in other people's houses. And I'd try out for soccer. Miss Peterson says I'd be good at it because I'm fast when I'm not too tired. Bryn's voice grew softer. I'd just do normal kid stuff. That's all I really want. The room had gone very quiet. Garrett felt Sutton's eyes on him, but couldn't bring himself to look at her. He was too busy trying not to break down in front of everyone. Dr. Hayes cleared her throat. Bryn, would you mind sitting with Ms. Westbrook for a few minutes while we talk to your dad about some boring medical details? Okay. Bryn slid out of her chair and went to sit next to Sutton, who immediately pulled out her phone and showed Bryn something that made her giggle. Doctor. Mitchell waited until they were absorbed in whatever was on the screen before leaning forward. Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your daughter is an ideal candidate for this trial. She meets every single criterion we've established. Her prognosis without intervention is poor. We're looking at continued immune deterioration, increasing infection frequency, and eventual organ failure from repeated septic episodes. The standard timeline for a case like hers is 18 months to 3 years. The words hit Garrett like physical blows, even though he already knew all this. Hearing it stated so clinically made it real in a way he'd been able to avoid when it was just his own midnight fears. However, Dr. Hayes continued, her voice gentler, but no less direct. The experimental protocol we're using has shown significant promise. In our current cohort of 47 participants, we've seen immune function improvement in 83% of cases. Complete remission, meaning the patient's body begins producing functional antibodies on its own, has occurred in 41%. What about the other 17%, the ones who don't improve? Some show no significant change in immune function, but tolerate the treatment without major complications. A small number, approximately 6%, have had adverse reactions that required them to withdraw from the trial. Dr. Mitchell's expression was serious. I won't lie to you, Mr. Sullivan. This is an experimental treatment. There are risks, but the alternative is watching Bryn's condition continue to deteriorate. What kind of adverse reactions? The most common are manageable nausea, fatigue, headaches, temporary fever. Those occur in about 60% of participants and typically resolve within the first month as the body adjusts. More serious reactions include severe allergic responses, which we monitor for very carefully during infusions. One participant developed a secondary autoimmune condition that required additional treatment, but is now stable. The most serious complication we've seen was kidney stress in a patient with underlying renal insufficiency, which Bryn doesn't have. Garrett processed this information, weighing risks he had no real ability to evaluate. What did he know about experimental immunology treatments? He was a graphic designer who Googled medical terms and tried to understand journal articles written for people with advanced degrees. If it works, his voice came out rough. If Bryn is one of the success cases, what does that look like? Dr. Hayes' expression softened. It looks like a little girl who goes to sleepovers, who tries out for soccer, who goes to the beach for an entire day without her father worrying himself sick about infections. It looks like a normal childhood. And if we don't do the trial, Dr. Mitchell's voice was quiet. Then we continue with the current treatment plan until it stops working entirely and hope we can manage the infections as they come. Hope, as if hope had ever been enough against an immune system that was slowly forgetting how to protect itself. Garrett looked across the room to where Bryn was still absorbed in whatever Sutton was showing her. His daughter, his entire world, the person he had sacrificed everything to save. What do I need to sign? The relief on both doctors' faces was palpable. Dr. Hayes pulled out a stack of paperwork that looked daunting even before Garrett started reading. There's quite a bit of consent documentation. We need to make sure you understand the full scope of the treatment, the potential risks, the monitoring requirements. The first month is the most intensive. Bryn would need to come in for infusions 3 times per week. We'd run blood work before and after each session to track her response. 3 times per week. Garrett tried to calculate how that would work with his freelance schedule, with Bryn's school attendance, with everything else. How long are the sessions? 2 to 3 hours per infusion. Most families find it easiest to schedule them in the late afternoon so the child doesn't miss a full school day. I can make that work. He'd have to make it work. There wasn't another option. They spent the next 40 minutes going through paperwork. Garrett signed consent forms and treatment agreements and liability waivers, his hand cramping from writing his name so many times. Dr. Hayes explained the monitoring protocols, the schedule for the first month, the signs of adverse reactions to watch for. Dr. Mitchell walked him through the medication regimen, changes, which drugs Bryn would stop taking, which new ones would be added. Sutton and Bryn rejoined them as they were finishing up. All set. Sutton's voice was carefully neutral. All set, Dr. Hayes confirmed. Bryn, how would you feel about starting your first treatment this Friday? Bryn's eyes went huge. This Friday, like 3 days from now, if that works for your schedule. We'd like to get started as soon as possible. Bryn looked at Garrett and he saw hope warring with fear in her expression. She'd been disappointed so many times. Been told yes, only to have it turn into no. Been promised treatments that didn't work. It's real this time, I promise. Ms. Westbrook promised too. Bryn looked at Sutton. She said she keeps her promises. Always. Bryn took a deep breath, straightened her small shoulders, and nodded with all the gravity of an 8-year-old making a life-altering decision. Okay, Friday works. The meeting wrapped up shortly after. Dr. Hayes and Dr. Mitchell both shook Bryn's hand like she was an equal partner in this arrangement, which she was. They gave Garrett folders full of information to review and multiple phone numbers to call if any questions came up. Sutton walked them down to the lobby instead of returning to her office. In the elevator, Bryn was uncharacteristically quiet, processing everything that had just happened. You okay, baby? I'm scared, but also happy. Is that weird? Not weird at all. Sutton's voice was gentle. It's okay to feel both things at the same time. They reached the ground floor, and Garrett expected Sutton to say goodbye and head back up. Instead, she walked them all the way out to the parking lot. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for what Sutton had done, was still doing for them. For everything. I don't even know how to. Don't, Sutton interrupted. This is what should have happened from the beginning. You don't thank someone for doing the bare minimum of human decency. It wasn't the bare minimum. You went to war for us. Your daughter deserves to live, Garrett. That shouldn't be a controversial position. Bryn tugged on Sutton's sleeve. Are you going to come with us on Friday for the treatment? Sutton hesitated, and Garrett could see her calculating commitments and schedules and all the important CEO things she probably had to do. I have a meeting with the board that afternoon, but I'll try to. Please. Bryn interrupted with the directness of a child who'd learned that adult promises often came with conditions. It would be less scary if you were there. And just like that, Sutton's careful professional distance crumbled completely. She crouched down to Bryn's level, her expensive suit wrinkling against the parking lot asphalt. Then I'll be there. The board can wait. Bryn threw her arms around Sutton's neck in an impulsive hug that clearly surprised both of them. Sutton froze for a second, then her arms came up to hold Bryn carefully like she was afraid of breaking something precious. When Bryn finally pulled back, there was something bright and fierce in Sutton's eyes that made Garrett's chest ache with recognition. They drove home in afternoon traffic, Bryn chattering about everything and nothing, the nervous energy pouring out of her in streams of questions and observations. Garrett let her talk, responding when she needed him to, but mostly just listening to the sound of his daughter being excited about a future that might actually exist now. His phone buzzed when they were stopped at a red light. Your daughter is extraordinary. Garrett smiled and typed back one-handed. I know. Friday at 3. I meant what I said. I'll be there. You don't have to disrupt your entire schedule for us. I'm not doing it for you. Garrett looked at the message for a long moment at the implication hiding between the words. Then he put his phone away and focused on getting his daughter home. That night, after Bryn was asleep, Garrett sat in his living room with the folders Dr. Hayes had given him and actually read through the treatment documentation. The medical terminology was dense, the risk disclosures sobering, the commitment required substantial, but also possibility. The chance that Bryn might get to have the normal life she described in that conference room. Soccer tryouts and sleepovers and whole days at the beach. His phone rang at 10:30. Unknown number, but something made him answer anyway. It's Sutton. Her voice sounded tired. I hope I'm not calling too late. No, I'm still up, reading through the treatment information. How are you feeling about it? Garrett leaned back against his couch, terrified, hopeful, grateful, all of it simultaneously. That sounds about right. There was a pause, then Sutton continued. I wanted you to know that I've instructed our billing department to work with you on the cost structure for Bryn's treatment. The trial itself is free, but there are associated expenses, lab work, monitoring, medications. We have assistance programs specifically for situations like yours. Bryn qualifies for maximum assistance. Sutton, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you that my company has resources specifically allocated for ensuring that financial barriers don't prevent eligible patients from receiving treatment. This is what those resources are for. This feels like charity. It's not charity. It's what my company was supposed to be doing all along before Thorne decided to play games with people's lives. Let me do this, Garrett. Please. He thought about his credit card debt and his bankruptcy filing and the medical bills stacked on his kitchen counter. Thought about the pride that had been beaten out of him over 4 years of watching his daughter suffer. Okay, thank you. Friday, I'll see you both Friday. She hung up before he could respond. Garrett sat in the dark for a long time after thinking about wrong numbers and second chances, and how one accidental text message had somehow become the thing that saved them. Thinking about a woman who'd built an empire to honor her dead sister and was now personally ensuring that another little girl got the chance her sister never had. Friday arrived with perfect California weather that seemed designed specifically for new beginnings. Garrett woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the sound of Bryn already up singing to herself in her room. He found her standing in front of her closet in her swimsuit, trying to decide which shorts to wear over it. The blue ones. Bryn turned her face bright with an excitement he hadn't seen in months. Do you think it'll hurt the treatment? A little probably. But Dr. Mitchell said they use numbing spray for the IV, and after that, you mostly just sit there while the medicine goes in. And Miss Westbrook will be there, she promised. And she keeps her promises. They arrived at the Genesis Treatment Center, a separate building from the main headquarters at 2:30 exactly. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and warm lighting, an aquarium built into one wall where tropical fish drifted in lazy circles. Children's artwork covered the walls, drawings and paintings from current and former trial participants. Messages of hope rendered in crayon and watercolor. Sutton was already there standing near the aquarium in dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her look younger, somehow more approachable. She smiled when she saw Bryn, a real smile that transformed her whole face. Right on time. Bryn ran into her and Sutton caught her in a hug that looked increasingly natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. I'm scared. Bryn's whisper was loud enough for Garrett to hear. I know, that's okay. Brave people are scared too. They just don't let the fear stop them. A nurse appeared from a side hallway, young and cheerful with purple scrubs and a name tag that read Jessica Turner. Garrett felt a hysterical laugh bubble up at the coincidence, the name that had started all of this showing up again now. Bryn Sullivan, that's me. Great. Let's get you checked in and see where we're starting from today. Are both parents coming back with you? There was a beat of awkward silence. Sutton started to correct the assumption, but Bryn spoke first. Yes, all of us are coming. The nurse smiled. Perfect. Follow me. They were led to a treatment room that looked more like a comfortable living room than a medical facility. A large recliner sat in the center surrounded by monitoring equipment that someone had clearly tried to make less intimidating with colorful stickers. A TV mounted on one wall showed a menu of kid-friendly movies. Windows along the far side looked out onto a small garden where hummingbirds darted between flowers. This is nice. Some of the tension left Bryn's shoulders. We try to make it as comfortable as possible. You'll be here for a few hours, so we want you to feel relaxed. Why don't you get settled in the chair while I grab Dr. Mitchell? He wants to talk to you before we start the infusion. Bryn climbed into the recliner and Jessica adjusted it so her feet weren't dangling. Garrett took the chair on one side of her while Sutton settled on the other. The three of them arranged like this was normal, like they were a family unit instead of two people and a stranger who'd accidentally wandered into their crisis. Dr. Mitchell arrived a few minutes later with a tablet and a reassuring smile. Hello, Bryn. How are you feeling today? Nervous? That's completely understandable. This is a big step. He pulled up a chair so he was at eye level with her. I want to explain exactly what's going to happen today so there are no surprises. Is that okay? Bryn nodded. First, Nurse Jessica is going to put in an IV. That's going to be the hardest part. It'll feel like a pinch and it might sting a little. But once it's in, you won't feel it anymore. Then we're going to give you the medicine through the IV. It's going to take about 2.5 hours. During that time, you might feel a little tired or get a headache, but those are normal reactions. We'll be checking on you every 15 minutes to make sure you're doing okay. Does that make sense? Will it hurt the medicine? I mean, not just the needle. Dr. Mitchell considered this seriously. Some kids say they don't feel anything at all. Some say they get a weird taste in their mouth or feel a little warm. Everyone's different, but if anything feels really wrong or really uncomfortable, you tell us immediately and we can slow down the infusion or take a break. You're in charge of your own body, Bryn. We don't do anything you're not okay with. Something in Bryn's expression relaxed at that, the acknowledgement that she had agency, that this wasn't just something being done to her. Okay, I'm ready. Jessica returned with the IV supplies. Garrett felt his own stomach clench. He'd watched Bryn get stuck with needles hundreds of times, blood draws, IV placements, immunoglobulin infusions. It never got easier. I'm going to use some numbing spray first. Jessica showed Bryn the small canister. It's going to feel cold, but it'll make the needle hurt less. Which hand do you want to use? Bryn held out her left hand and Jessica sprayed the numbing agent over the vein in the back of her hand. While they waited for it to take effect, Jessica talked Bryn through each step. The needle went in clean on the first try, and Bryn only flinched slightly. Within minutes, the IV was secured, and Jessica was programming the infusion pump. All set. I'll be back in 15 minutes to check on you. If you need anything before then, just press this call button. She left, and suddenly it was just the three of them and the quiet hum of the infusion pump, measuring out hope in milliliters per hour. What do you want to watch? Sutton picked up the TV remote. Bryn considered the options scrolling across the screen. Can we watch something you like instead of kids' stuff? Sutton looked surprised. Are you sure? Yeah, I want to know what kind of shows you watch. Something soft crossed Sutton's face. She scrolled through the options and selected a nature documentary about ocean life. I like these. They're calming. They settled in to watch footage of sea turtles gliding through coral reefs, while the medicine dripped slowly into Bryn's bloodstream. Garrett found himself watching his daughter more than the screen, cataloging every expression, every shift in her breathing, searching for signs of distress. 15 minutes passed. Jessica returned, checked Bryn's vitals, confirmed everything looked good, and disappeared again. How do you feel? Okay, I think. A little weird. Like I can taste metal. That's normal. It should fade in a few minutes. Bryn turned her attention back to the documentary, and Garrett felt Sutton's hand find his on the armrest between their chairs. She didn't say anything, just laced her fingers through his and held on. Garrett stared at their joined hands, this small gesture of solidarity from a woman who had every reason to keep her distance, and felt something crack open in his chest. The infusion finished at 5:43, nearly 3 hours after it had started. Dr. Mitchell came in personally to oversee Bryn's post-treatment vitals and examination. How do you feel? Tired? And my head hurts a little, but not too bad. That's very normal. The fatigue and headache should improve over the next few hours. Make sure you drink plenty of water tonight and get extra rest. No school tomorrow. Give your body time to adjust. Okay. Jessica removed the IV, carefully placing a small bandage decorated with the cartoon stars over the insertion site. Bryn stared at it like it was a badge of honor. First treatment down. Jessica's voice was cheerful. You did great, Bryn. They collected the post-treatment instruction sheets and scheduled the next session for Monday afternoon. Dr. Mitchell walked them out to the lobby, answering Garrett's anxious questions about warning signs and when to call if something seemed wrong. You have my direct number. Call anytime if you're worried. But honestly, she handled that better than most kids do on their first infusion. I think she's going to do really well with this protocol. In the parking lot, the early evening air was cool against Garrett's face. Bryn leaned heavily against his side, exhausted from the treatment and the stress of the day. Thank you for being here. He looked at Sutton. It meant a lot to both of us. I meant what I said. I wanted to be here. Will you come to the next one too? Bryn's voice was drowsy but hopeful. Garrett started to intervene. She couldn't expect Sutton to rearrange her schedule twice a week for a child she barely knew, but Sutton answered before he could. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next month. Right? I'll be at every single one. You have a company to run. I have a company that exists to help patients like Bryn. Being present for her treatment is exactly what I should be doing. Besides, the board can function without me for a few hours 3 times a week. They've been managing for years. Bryn smiled, her exhaustion lifting slightly. Okay, I'll see you Monday then. They said their goodbyes and Garrett got Bryn buckled into the car. She was asleep before they left the parking lot, her small face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. Garrett drove home carefully, taking the turns, slowly protecting his precious cargo. His phone buzzed at a red light. He glanced at it. She's going to make it. I can feel it. Garrett wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that this treatment would be the thing that finally worked, that they'd be part of the 83% instead of the 17 who didn't respond. But hope was dangerous when you'd been disappointed so many times. Still, he typed back, "Thank you for today, for all of it. It was my honor." The weekend passed in a blur of rest and recovery. Bryn slept more than usual, her body processing the new medicine. The headache faded by Saturday afternoon, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that kept her on the couch watching movies. Garrett hovered, checking her temperature every few hours, making her drink water and eat small meals, watching for any sign that something was going wrong. Nothing did. By Sunday evening, Bryn actually had more energy than she'd shown in weeks. She wanted to help make dinner, chattering about the nature documentaries they'd watched during the infusion, asking if they could learn more about ocean life. We can go to the library this week. Get some books. Can we invite Ms. Westbrook? She knows a lot about animals. She could help us pick good books. Garrett's response was careful. Bryn, I know you like her, but we can't take up all her time. She's a very busy person. But she said she wanted to spend time with us. She said she'd come to all my treatments. That's different. That's about your medical care. Bryn looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes. I think she's lonely, Daddy. Like how you get lonely sometimes even though you don't say it. The observation hit harder than it should have. What makes you think I get lonely? Because sometimes at night I hear you talking on the phone to grandma and you tell her you're fine, but your voice sounds sad. And because you signed up for that dating app, even though you're scared, nobody will want to date someone with a sick kid. Garrett set down the pot he was draining, hands suddenly unsteady. Bryn, it's okay to be lonely. Bryn's matter-of-fact tone made it worse somehow. I get lonely too sometimes. Even though I have you and you're the best dad in the whole world, sometimes I wish I had more people. Like maybe a mom who didn't leave, or brothers and sisters, or just more family in general. And I think Ms. Westbrook wishes she had more people too. I can tell by the way she looks at us. How does she look at us like we're something she wants but doesn't think she can have? Monday's treatment went even better than Friday's. Bryn knew what to expect this time, and the anticipation was less frightening than the unknown had been. Sutton showed up at 2:30 on the dot, carrying a bag from the library. I thought you might like these. She pulled out 3 books about wolves and marine wildlife. I stopped by on my lunch break. Bryn's face lit up like Sutton had brought her the moon itself. You remembered. Of course I remembered. They settled into what was becoming a routine. Bryn in the recliner, Garrett and Sutton on either side, Jessica placing the IV with practiced efficiency. This time, Bryn only flinched a little at the needle stick, already adjusting to the process. During the infusion, Sutton read aloud from one of the Wolf books, her voice steady and soothing. Bryn listened with rapt attention, asking questions that Sutton answered with the same seriousness she probably brought to board meetings. Halfway through the treatment, Bryn fell asleep mid-sentence, exhausted by the medicine. Sutton kept reading anyway, her voice dropping to a whisper, and Garrett realized she was doing it as much for herself as for Bryn. When she paused to turn a page, he spoke quietly. Thank you for being here. For caring about her, you didn't have to do any of this? Yes, I did. Sutton set the book aside. The moment I read her file, the moment I understood what Thorne had done, there was no other choice. She looked down at Bryn with infinite tenderness. She's my... Her voice caught, and she didn't finish the sentence. But Garrett heard what she couldn't say. She's my daughter now. Of course I was going to fight for her. At some point during that second treatment, Sutton's hand found his again on the armrest. Neither of them acknowledged it, but neither pulled away. They sat there in the quiet hum of medical machinery, watching a child sleep connected by something neither could name, but both felt. The week progressed. Wednesday's treatment, Fridays. By the end of the second week, Bryn was navigating the infusions like a veteran, barely flinching at the IV placement, settling into the recliner with the confidence of familiarity. And Sutton showed up to every single one. She rearranged meetings and postponed conference calls and told her executive assistant that 3 afternoons a week were now blocked off as unavailable. When board members questioned her priorities, she shut them down with the kind of authority that had built a multi-billion-dollar company. Patient care is our mission. If you have a problem with the CEO, occasionally remembering that we can discuss your continued board membership. The conversations ended shortly after. By the end of the 3rd week, something had shifted between all 3 of them. The careful professional distance Sutton had tried to maintain had eroded, completely replaced by something that looked suspiciously like family. She knew how Bryn liked her snacks during treatments. She brought books that matched Bryn's interests. She remembered which nurses Bryn liked best and requested them specifically. And with Garrett, the boundaries had blurred in ways neither of them seemed able to stop. Hands that found each other during tense moments. Conversations that went deeper than they should. Looks that lingered too long to be accidental. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into treatment. Garrett's phone rang while he was working on a client project Bryn at school. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Sullivan, this is Patricia Chen from Meridian's legal department. I'm calling to inform you that Thorne Ashford has filed a lawsuit against Meridian Therapeutics and Ms. Westbrook personally. Garrett's stomach dropped. What the lawsuit alleges: wrongful termination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. More concerning for you, Mr. Ashford is threatening to go public with the allegations that Ms. Westbrook is using her position to engage in an inappropriate personal relationship with a patient's family. There's no Garrett couldn't form coherent sentences. I'm not calling to question the nature of your relationship with Ms. Westbrook. I'm calling because our legal team has advised that until this matter is resolved, Ms. Westbrook should cease all personal contact with you and your daughter to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Garrett felt like he'd been punched. You're telling me she can't come to Bryn's treatments anymore. We're advising that it would be in everyone's best interest if Ms. Westbrook maintained appropriate professional boundaries during this litigation. The call ended shortly after. Garrett sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. An hour later, a text came through from Sutton. I need to step back from treatment sessions. Legal risk, I'm so sorry. He read it 3 times, rage building in his chest like a living thing. Then he grabbed his keys. The receptionist at Meridian tried to stop him, but Garrett pushed past. Security started toward him, but Sutton appeared in the lobby before they could intervene. We need to talk. Her face was pale, her usual composure cracking at the edges. Not here. My office, gnome here. Garrett's voice echoed in the marble lobby. You're abandoning her. You promised you'd be there, and you're letting Thorne win. I'm trying to protect the trial. Sutton's eyes were bright with unshed tears. If Thorne can prove conflict of interest, he could get Bryn kicked out. So you're choosing your company over my daughter? The accusation hung between them, brutal and unfair, and exactly how Garrett felt. Sutton flinched like he'd slapped her. I'm choosing Bryn's survival over my feelings. That's what love means. Garrett froze. Love, yes, Sutton's voice broke. Love, I love both of you. That's why I have to stay away. They stared at each other in the crowded lobby, security hovering nearby, other employees pretending not to watch. Then Garrett turned and walked out. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Bryn's mood dropped despite the treatment working physically. Her blood work showed antibody improvement, but she was withdrawn, barely talking. She'd stopped mentioning Sutton, stopped asking when she'd see her again. Just went through the motions of treatments with a flatness that scared Garrett more than any medical complication. Friday of week 5. Dr. Mitchell pulled him aside after the session. Is everything okay at home? Bryn's effect has changed significantly. Garrett didn't know what to say, how to explain that his daughter had bonded with someone who'd then disappeared, that she felt abandoned by yet another adult who'd promised to stay. That night, after Bryn was finally asleep, Garrett called Sutton for the first time since their confrontation. Bryn's heartbroken. I'm heartbroken. Thorne wins if we do this. The lawsuit, fuck the lawsuit. Sophie needs you, I need you, and you need us. Silence stretched across the line. I can't lose her, Garrett. If Thorne gets the trial canceled, then we fight him together. But you don't get to decide to protect us by leaving. We're a team or we're not. More silence. Then Sutton's voice, small and broken. I'm scared. Me too. But Bryn taught me something brave. People are scared too. They just don't let fear stop them. Another long pause. I'll be there Monday for the first weekly treatment, and every one after. Good. Garrett hung up and sat in the darkness of his living room, hoping he'd made the right choice, hoping that choosing love over fear wouldn't be the thing that destroyed them all. Monday of week 7 arrived with fog that clung to the windows like something alive. Garrett woke to find Bryn already dressed, standing by the front window, watching for Sutton's car. She'd been there since 6:30, her small frame silhouetted against the gray morning light, waiting. You know she might not come until 2:30, right? We don't leave for treatment until 2. Bryn didn't turn around. I know. I just want to make sure I see her when she gets here. The car arrived at 2:15. Sutton stepped out carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, Bryn's favorite, though Garrett had no memory of mentioning that. His daughter's careful composure shattered. She ran out the door before Garrett could stop her, launching herself at Sutton with enough force to make the taller woman stumble. You came back. Sutton knelt on the driveway, heedless of her jeans on the concrete. I'm so sorry I left. I was scared and I made a mistake. I'm here now. For good. Adults make promises. Bryn's voice held all the accumulated disappointment of her 8 years. I know they do. And I'm asking you to trust me one more time. I promise I'm not going anywhere again. Something in Bryn's rigid posture softened. She nodded against Sutton's shoulder, and they stayed like that for a long moment before Bryn pulled back. Okay, but if you leave again, I'm going to be really mad. Fair enough. The treatment session that afternoon felt like coming home after a long absence. Bryn settled into the recliner with practiced ease, barely wincing when Jessica placed the IV. Sutton read from where they'd left off in the Wolf book, her voice steady and familiar. Garrett watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd become essential to both their lives, and felt something settle in his chest that had been jagged and wrong for 2 weeks. Dr. Mitchell stopped by during the infusion ostensibly to check Bryn's vitals, but really to observe the dynamic. His approval was subtle but clear in the way he smiled at the three of them arranged around the recliner like a family portrait. After the treatment, as they walked to the parking lot, Sutton cleared her throat. "I want to take you both somewhere this Sunday, if you're free," where Bryn's curiosity overrode her earlier wariness. "My house, in La Jolla, it has a private beach." Bryn's eyes went huge. "A real beach, where we can actually go. That's the idea." Sutton glanced at Garrett. "If that's okay with your dad." Garrett thought about the risks, ocean germs exposure, all the things that had kept Bryn from normal childhood experiences. Then he thought about Dr. Mitchell's latest report, antibody levels trending upward for 3 consecutive weeks. Immune response strengthening. Body beginning to remember how to protect itself. Yeah, we can do that. Sunday arrived with the kind of weather that travel brochures used to sell the California dream. Sutton's house perched on a cliff top in La Jolla, all glass and weathered wood that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. Inside was warm, rather than sterile books, stacked on side tables, a collection of sea glass in a wooden bowl, framed photographs including one of a young girl with a bright smile who could only be Elise. Bryn went straight to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I can see everything. That's the Pacific Ocean." Sutton came to stand beside her. "And down there," she pointed, "that's our beach." "Our beach." Bryn tested the words like they might disappear. "Our beach." They ate breakfast on the deck overlooking the water pastries from the same bakery, coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of desperation, orange juice fresh squeezed. Bryn demolished 2 croissants and a chocolate Danish while asking questions about the house, the beach. Whether there really were dolphins. Sometimes, especially in the morning, and seals. There's a colony that lives on the rocks about a quarter-mile down. Can we look for them? Please, that's why you're here. The wooden staircase down the cliff face had 107 steps. Bryn counted each one aloud, her voice bright with an excitement Garrett hadn't heard in months. At the bottom, she kicked off her shoes the instant her feet touched sand and took off running toward the water. "Bryn, wait. Let me put sunscreen on you first." She skidded to a stop at the water's edge, hopping impatiently from foot to foot, while Garrett caught up and slathered her with SPF 50. The moment he finished, she was off again, wading into the shallows and shrieking with delight when a wave caught her by surprise. Garrett stood at the edge of the water, watching his daughter play like a normal 8-year-old for the first time in longer than he could remember. No fear of germs or infections or immune system failure. Just pure, uncomplicated joy. "She looks good." Sutton appeared beside him, her own shoes abandoned somewhere up the beach. "The treatment's working. It's only been 7 weeks. I've seen the blood work. Dr. Mitchell shared it with me yesterday. Her antibody levels are already starting to trend upwards significantly. It's subtle, but it's there." Garrett felt his throat tighten. "Really, really? She's responding to the protocol, Garrett. Not just tolerating it, actually responding." They spent the morning building sandcastles that Bryn engineered with startling architectural ambition. She directed them like a tiny foreman, insisting on moats and towers, and a drawbridge made from driftwood Garrett found washed up on the shore. It needs to be historically accurate. Real castles had strategic defensive positions. "Where did you learn about medieval castle architecture?" Sutton was clearly amused. "I read a lot when I'm stuck in bed being sick." "History's interesting." They worked on the castle for over an hour, adding details and reinforcements, while Bryn narrated an elaborate story about the princess who lived there and the dragon she'd befriended. "Not all dragons are bad," she explained this with utmost seriousness. "People just assume they are because they look scary, but maybe they're just misunderstood." "That's very wise." Something in Sutton's voice made Garrett look up. She was watching Bryn with an expression of such raw tenderness it hurt to witness. When the castle was complete, Bryn insisted on photos from every angle. Sutton pulled out her phone and obliged, then set it up on a nearby rock to capture all three of them crouched beside their creation. The image froze them in a moment that looked exactly like what they were pretending not to be a family. After lunch, sandwiches and fruit and cookies that Bryn loved, they explored the shoreline. Bryn found shells and sea glass collecting treasures in a bucket Sutton had brought. She discovered a tide pool teeming with tiny crabs and sea anemones, crouching beside it for 20 minutes, while Sutton explained the ecosystem with the same precision she probably used in corporate presentations. You really do know everything. Hardly. But I like learning about things. It makes the world feel less overwhelming when you can understand how it works. Is that why you became a scientist? I'm not really a scientist anymore. I just run the company that employs scientists. But you were one before. Daddy told me you studied immunology because of your sister. Sutton glanced at Garrett surprised. He shrugged slightly, not apologetic. I did. PhD in immunology from Stanford. Spent 5 years doing research before I realized I could have more impact building a company than working in a lab. Do you miss it? The science part. Sutton considered this while watching a hermit crab navigate around her foot. Sometimes. There's something pure about research, asking questions and searching for answers, without worrying about profit margins or shareholder value. But running Meridian means I get to fund dozens of researchers asking those questions. It's a different kind of contribution. I think your sister would be proud. Bryn's matter-of-fact tone carried absolute conviction. Of both, the science you did and the company you built. Because either way, you're helping people. Sutton's breath caught audibly. She pulled Bryn into a fierce hug that the little girl returned without hesitation. Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. They stayed at the beach until mid-afternoon when Bryn's energy finally started to flag. The treatments always left her more tired than usual, and today had been more physical activity than she'd managed in months. She fell asleep in the car on the drive back up to the house, her face sun-kissed and peaceful. Garrett carried her inside and settled her on Sutton's couch, covering her with a soft throw blanket. She didn't even stir, completely worn out in the best possible way. Coffee, Sutton offered quietly. Please. They sat on the deck with their coffee while Bryn slept inside the late afternoon sun, turning the ocean gold and orange. Garrett felt pleasantly exhausted himself, the good kind of tired that came from sun and salt water, and watching his daughter be truly happy. Thank you for today. This meant everything to her. To both of us, I should be thanking you. Sutton's voice was soft. I can't remember the last time I had a day like this, just being present instead of constantly thinking 3 steps ahead. You're allowed to have days like this. You're allowed to have a life outside your company. Am I? Sutton's smile was rueful. I built my entire existence around Meridian. It's all I've had for the past 15 years. Work and more work and occasionally sleep. Is that why your marriage failed? Sutton was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean. Partially, but mostly it failed because we were never really compatible in the first place. I married Thorne because he seemed stable and successful, and because I was 36 and thought I should probably have a partner. Not exactly romantic. What would you do differently if you could go back? I'd wait for someone who made me feel something real instead of settling for someone who looked good on paper. She turned to look at Garrett directly. I'd wait for someone who reminded me that there's more to life than quarterly earnings reports and FDA approvals. Someone who showed me what actual love looks like instead of just the performance of it. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Sutton, I know. I know this is complicated and probably inappropriate, and you have much more important things to worry about than whatever this is becoming. But I need you to know that these past weeks being with you and Bryn have mattered to me more than I know how to articulate. Garrett set down his coffee cup carefully. It's not inappropriate, and it's not one-sided if that's what you're worried about. The words came easier than he expected. Bryn asked me the other day if I thought you were lonely. She said you look at us like we're something you want, but don't think you can have. Sutton's laugh was shaky. Very perceptive kid. She is. And she was right, wasn't she? Completely right. Sutton's voice dropped. I look at what you have with Bryn, that unconditional love, that partnership, that sense of being a team against the world, and I want it so badly it physically hurts. I built an empire to honor my sister's memory, but I forgot to build an actual life. So build one now. It's not too late. With you, the question was barely a whisper. If you want. If you're willing to take on a broke single dad and his chronically ill daughter and all the chaos that comes with us. Garrett, you're not broke. You're resourceful and devoted and doing everything humanly possible to keep your daughter alive. That's not something to apologize for. Sutton leaned forward. And Bryn isn't a burden. She's extraordinary. She is. But that doesn't change the reality of our situation. I have medical debt, and I work freelance from home, and my life revolves entirely around treatment schedules and doctor's appointments. That's not exactly appealing. Sutton shifted closer, her eyes intense. Do you want to know what I find appealing? A man who shows up for his daughter every single day without fail, who learns medical terminology he never wanted to know because knowledge might save her life, who sends accidental flirty texts to the wrong number and then doesn't run away when the CEO shows up demanding answers. That's appealing, Garrett. That's real. We've known each other for 7 weeks. I knew within 7 minutes of reading Bryn's file that something was deeply wrong with how she'd been treated. I knew within 7 hours of meeting her that I'd do whatever it took to help her. Time is relative when the connection is real. Garrett wanted to argue to point out all the logical reasons this couldn't work. But the truth was, he'd been falling for Sutton since that first afternoon when she'd shown up at his house and demanded to know the truth about his daughter. Since she'd promised Bryn she'd be at every treatment and then actually followed through. Since she'd sat beside Bryn's recliner reading about wolves like it was the most important meeting on her calendar. My life is messy, really messy, and for the foreseeable future, Bryn has to come first. Always. I wouldn't respect you if it was any other way. And I'm not asking for easy, Garrett. I'm just asking for real. Before he could respond, Bryn's voice drifted from inside the house. Daddy, where are you? They both stood. Garrett went inside to find Bryn sitting up on the couch, rubbing her eyes. Hey, sleepyhead. How do you feel, Tud? Hungry. She looked around, taking in her surroundings with sleepy confusion. Did I fall asleep? I don't remember coming back to the house. You conked out in the car. It's been a big day. Bryn's face lit up with the memory. We built a castle and found sea glass, and Sutton showed me the crabs. She looked past Garrett to where Sutton stood in the doorway. Can we come back? Please, any time you want. This is your beach now, too. Week 14 brought news that changed everything. Dr. Mitchell's office called to schedule an evaluation appointment, and the careful optimism in the nurse's tone made Garrett's hands shake. They sat in the small exam room, Garrett, Sutton, and Bryn, while Dr. Mitchell reviewed his tablet with a cautious smile. Bryn's antibody levels have been stable and strong for 6 consecutive weeks. Her body is producing functional immune responses independently. He looked up, meeting Garrett's eyes directly. She's in remission. If this trajectory holds, Bryn can live a completely normal, healthy life. Garrett gripped Sutton's hand tight enough to hurt. The room seemed to tilt sideways, reality reshaping itself around this impossible possibility. So I can try out for soccer, Bryn's voice cut through his haze. Dr. Mitchell laughed. You can absolutely try out for soccer. And science camp this summer. All of it, Bryn. You can do all of it. Garrett buried his face in Sutton's shoulder, finally letting himself cry. 4 years of fighting, of hoping, of watching his daughter fade a little more each day, and now remission. The word felt too big to hold. That night after Bryn was asleep, Sutton called. Move in with me, you and Bryn. Not because of money or convenience, but because I love you both. Because I want us to be a family, officially. Garrett sat in his dark living room, phone pressed to his ear. That's fast. We've been together 3.5 months. I spent 3 years married to Thorne feeling nothing. I've felt more with you in 3 months than my entire previous relationship. When you know, you know. What about Bryn? What if this doesn't work? Another abandonment could destroy her. Then we make it work. I'm not going anywhere, Garrett. I'm all in. He discussed it with Bryn the next morning over breakfast. How would you feel if we moved in with Sutton, into her house? Bryn's eyes went huge. The beach house, really. But it's a big change. And if things don't work out between Sutton and me, do you love her? Go. Does she love us? Yes. Then why wouldn't it work? Bryn's 8-year-old logic was flawless. You're both grown-ups. Don't overcomplicate it. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just worry too much. They moved in during week 18, February, arriving with rain that washed the city clean. Bryn got her own room overlooking the ocean, decorated exactly how she wanted, with Sutton's patient help. She started at a new school, closer to Meridian's headquarters, adjusted quickly, made friends. But cohabitation brought challenges neither Garrett nor Sutton had fully anticipated. Different parenting styles clashed. Sutton, sometimes too permissive, sometimes too strict, second-guessing herself constantly. Garrett struggled with feeling kept Sutton's wealth making him uncomfortable in ways he couldn't articulate. The lawsuit Thorne had filed dragged on depositions and motions and legal bills mounting. One night they argued rare but brutal about boundaries in the future and Thorne's ongoing threats. Bryn overheard from her room and came out crying. "Are you getting divorced too?" The question stopped them both cold. They started family counseling the following week. Learn to communicate better, set healthy boundaries, navigate the complicated dynamics of blending their lives. Garrett worked through his trauma, the abandonment by his ex-wife, the years in crisis mode, the deep-seated fear of losing Bryn. Sutton processed Elise's death, her workaholism as avoidance, her terror of inadequacy as a mother. Bryn addressed her own fears, the illness that had defined her, the worry about relapse, the desperate need for stability. It wasn't fairy tale perfect, but it was real growth. By week 24, Sutton had stopped letting Thorne's lawsuit consume her. When the legal team brought updates, she listened with professional detachment rather than personal anguish. Thorne can have money, he can have stock options, but he can't have this family. I have something more important to protect now. Garrett's design business grew steadily. The major client he'd landed led to others word of mouth in the startup community about the freelancer who actually understood small business dynamics. His income nearly doubled, still nowhere near Sutton's level, but enough to feel like he was contributing. One evening, after a particularly successful client presentation, he told Sutton about it. "They almost went with a big agency, but they hired me because I understood their business from the ground up, because I know what it's like to build something from nothing." The words came with pride rather than defensiveness. Experience and practical skills still have value. They hired competence, not credentials. December arrived with the city draped in Christmas lights. Bryn's quarterly checkup showed remission, holding strong 15% relapse risk long-term but currently stable. They celebrated with dinner at the harbor. The three of them squeezed into a booth, watching boats decked in colored bulbs drift past. Bryn was working through fish tacos when she suddenly went quiet, her expression turning serious. "Are you going to be with us for Christmas, like actually with us?" "Not just visiting," Sutton glanced at Garrett. "I'd like to be, if that's okay with both of you." "I mean like family with us, not like a guest." Bryn launched into her prepared speech with the earnestness only an 8-year-old could muster. "You come to all my treatments, and we have dinner every Sunday, and you keep clothes at our house. Well, we live at your house now, but you know what I mean. You're basically already family. So can we just make it official how I want Sutton to be my family? Like really my family, not just daddy's girlfriend or whatever. I want her to be mine too." Garrett's chest constricted. "Official how, Bryn? If you two got married, she'd be my stepmom." Bryn's logic was airtight. "And I know stepmoms get a bad reputation in fairy tales, but I think you'd be really good at it." The restaurant went very quiet around their table. Garrett stared at his daughter, who just casually proposed marriage on his behalf, with all the confidence of a child who saw things simply and clearly. "I know you're going to say it's too fast, or we should wait, or whatever grown-ups say when they're scared. But you love each other and we're happy together, and waiting doesn't actually make anything better. It just means we waste time being careful instead of being a real family." Sutton was crying now, tears streaming down her face while she also smiled. "So what do you think, Daddy? Are you going to ask her, or should I?" Garrett looked at Sutton across the table, this brilliant, complicated woman who'd crashed into their lives because of a wrong number and decided to stay because she loved them. Looked at his daughter, healthier than she'd been in years, and brave enough to ask for what she wanted. He thought about all the reasons this was too fast and too soon and potentially reckless. Then he thought about what Sutton had said about being tired of careful and strategic, about wanting something real and messy and honest. "I don't have a ring. I haven't planned a romantic proposal. I'm still in debt and figuring out how to rebuild my design business from scratch." He reached across the table and took Sutton's hand. "But if you're willing to take on all of that, take on us, I'd really like to marry you, Sutton." Sutton laughed and cried simultaneously, nodding before he had even finished the sentence. "Yes, absolutely yes." Bryn cheered loud enough that the entire restaurant turned to look, and Garrett didn't care. He stood and moved around the table to kiss Sutton properly, and the other diners started applauding, swept up in the moment. When they finally pulled apart, Sutton was still crying, but her smile was incandescent. "I can't believe you just proposed to me in a harbor seafood restaurant because our 8-year-old told you to." "Our 8-year-old? You hear that? Bryn Sutton's officially going to be your stepmom." I know, that's what I said. Bryn went back to her tacos like she hadn't just orchestrated an engagement. They got dessert to celebrate. Walked around the harbor for another hour, looking at Christmas lights, Bryn between them holding both their hands. She announced their engagement to strangers with shameless enthusiasm. At home, they tucked Bryn into bed together, Garrett reading the story while Sutton sat on the floor beside the bed. When Bryn's eyes finally drifted closed, Sutton leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Mom." Bryn murmured it half asleep and Sutton froze. Her eyes flew to Garrett's. He saw the panic and hope and fear all mixed together. "She called me Mom." "She did. Is that okay? I don't want to overstep or replace anyone," or "Her biological mother walked out when she was 2 and hasn't contacted us in 6 years." "You're not replacing anyone. You're becoming exactly what Bryn needs you to be." They kept the engagement quiet through the holidays, protecting themselves from media scrutiny. Sutton's divorce from Thorne was still pending, and neither wanted that spotlight falling on an 8-year-old in remission. Christmas morning, Bryn woke them both at 6:30, bouncing on their bed with energy she hadn't had in years. Presents. There are so many presents. Come on, Sutton had possibly gone overboard. The area under the tree was buried in wrapped packages, books about marine biology, art supplies, a microscope for science projects, new clothes, a tablet loaded with educational apps. But Bryn's favorite gift was the last one, a small box Sutton handed her personally. Inside was a necklace with a charm shaped like a DNA helix. "It represents your immune system. Your DNA learning to protect itself again." "I had it custom made." Bryn stared at it with reverence. "It's perfect. Will you help me put it on?" Sutton clasped it around Bryn's neck with trembling fingers, and Garrett captured the moment on his phone, his daughter and his fiancée building something new and precious. Later, after Bryn had gone outside to play with some of her new things, Sutton handed Garrett a wrapped package. "For me. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" Inside was a leather portfolio case, expensive and professional, embossed with his name and the words Sullivan Creative Design, for when you start taking on those bigger clients. A reminder that you're allowed to think bigger than just survival. Emotion clogged Garrett's throat. "I don't have anything this nice for you." Sutton took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Yes, you do. You gave me a family. You gave me a life beyond my company. That's worth more than anything money can buy." New Year's arrived with champagne toasts and noisemakers. Bryn stayed up until midnight for the first time because she was finally healthy enough to handle the late night. They stood on Sutton's deck, watching fireworks bloom over the ocean, Bryn between them, counting down the seconds. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Garrett kissed Sutton while Bryn cheered, thinking about how much had changed in a single year. How an accidental text message had led to this moment, to this family, to this future they were building together. Week 30 brought unexpected news. Sutton stood in their bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test, her hands shaking. "I'm 42. I've never been pregnant. I spent years telling myself I didn't want children, then more years thinking I'd missed my chance." She looked up at Garrett with wonder and terror mixed equally. "I don't know if I can do this." "You're already doing it. You've been Bryn's mom for months now. But from the very beginning, raising a child from birth, giving Bryn the sibling she's been asking for." "Yes, I want that, if you do." They told Bryn on her 9th birthday with a wrapped box containing a t-shirt that read, "Big Sister." Bryn stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before the implications sank in. Then she launched herself at Sutton, hard enough to nearly knock her over. "Really, really, truly, I'm going to be a big sister. Really, truly, in about 7 months. This is the best birthday present ever, even better than the microscope last year." But the pregnancy brought complications. Week 20, Sutton developed gestational diabetes. Blood sugar management became another daily routine, testing insulin, carefully calibrated meals. Week 32, the doctor prescribed bed rest for the final 8 weeks. Sutton struggled with the forced inactivity. "I can't work full capacity. I can't even walk around my own house without getting winded. I feel useless." Nathan stepped up in ways he hadn't known he was capable of. Managing the household, caring for Bryn, supporting Sutton through the difficult last trimester. Bryn rose to the occasion, too, helping around the house, talking to Sutton's growing belly. "I'm going to be the best big sister. I'll protect you if you get sick because I know all about doctors and being brave." They'd set the wedding for late September, week 44, before they knew about the pregnancy. Sutton suggested postponing, but Garrett refused. We're not waiting. We'll just have a very pregnant bride. The ceremony took place on the beach behind their house at sunset. Small and intimate, immediate family and close friends. Bryn served as ring bearer, walking down the sandy aisle with intense concentration. Garrett stood under an arch of driftwood and flowers, watching Sutton walk toward him in a simple white dress that accommodated her 7-month belly. She was radiant despite the pregnancy complications, despite everything. When it came time for vows, Sutton turned slightly to include Bryn. I promise to love you both with everything I have, to show up consistently and fight for this family and choose you every single day, to honor Elise's memory by living fully and loving completely, to be the mother Bryn deserves and the partner Garrett needs. Garrett's vows were simpler. I promise to let you in even when it's scary, to trust that you're here for the long haul, to build something real and messy and honest with you, to love you and let you love us back. Bryn grabbed both their hands, and I promise to be the best daughter and stepdaughter ever, and to remind you both when you're being dumb about feelings. The small gathering erupted in laughter, and the officiant declared them a family. Week 52, baby Liam arrived healthy despite the gestational diabetes complications. Bryn was the first to hold him after his parents cradling him with intense concentration. He's so tiny. Was I this tiny, even tinier? I'm going to take such good care of him. And she did, helping with feedings and diaper changes, entertaining him when he was fussy, introducing him to the ocean and the beach and all her favorite treasures. But adjustment wasn't instant. Around month 3, Bryn had a jealousy phase. The baby got so much attention, and she felt displaced despite everyone's best efforts. Family therapy helped validating Bryn's feelings, ensuring one-on-one time, making sure she knew her place in the family was secure. By month 6, she'd found her role as protective big sister. I'm still special, just in a different way. 18 months after the initial lawsuit filing, Thorne's trial concluded. Found guilty on 3 counts of fraud. Criminal sentence 2 years in prison, $500,000 fine, permanent ban from pharmaceutical board positions. His civil lawsuit against Sutton was dismissed with prejudice. Sutton didn't celebrate. I just wanted him to stop hurting people. He can't anymore. You made sure of that. She refocused her energy on Meridian launching a scholarship fund for families who couldn't afford treatment, the Emma Westbrook Memorial Fund. 2 years after that wrong text message, Garrett stood on their deck watching his family. Sutton in a beach chair with 18-month-old Liam toddling nearby. Bryn building sandcastles strong and healthy and fearless. The afternoon sun golden over everything. He felt gratitude so intense it was almost painful. His phone buzzed. Sutton, even though she was 20 feet away. Thank you for that wrong text. Best mistake anyone ever made. He typed back, best mistake was being brave enough to let you into our lives. Sutton looked up from her phone and smiled across the deck. That brilliant smile that still made his heart stutter. Sophie ran up the stairs from the beach with a perfect sand dollar. More good luck. We don't need more luck. Garrett pulled all of them close. We have everything right here. 4 years after the text message, they gathered at the beach house for Bryn's 12th birthday. The party was full of school friends, soccer teammates, science club kids. Bryn was still in remission, now considered cured with continued monitoring. Liam, now 3, terrorized the older kids with water balloons. Garrett's design firm was established and successful. Sutton had achieved actual work-life balance, passing day-to-day operations to her COO. That evening, after the guests left, the 4 of them walked down to the beach. The sun set in shades of pink and gold that looked too beautiful to be real. Daddy, remember when you sent that text to the wrong number? How could I forget? That was the luckiest accident ever. Some wrong numbers turn out to be exactly right. Sutton's voice was soft. And some families aren't born. They're chosen, built, fought for. That's the best kind. Garrett looked at his extraordinary, impossible, perfect family. He thought about how he'd once believed that raising Bryn alone was the failure of his life. Now he knew it was the challenge that had forged him into the man strong enough to accept love when it came disguised as a wrong number. Sometimes people who seem like strangers become family, while family becomes strangers. I choose the people who stay, not the people who share my blood. The words hung in the ocean air, salt-tinged and true. Bryn leaned against Garrett's side while Liam chased hermit crabs and Sutton stood with her hand in his, all of them silhouetted against the dying light. One text message, 17 minutes of decision-making. One woman brave enough to show up and one man brave enough to let her in. A sick child who became healthy. A lonely CEO who became a mother. A struggling designer who became successful. And a family that proved love doesn't require biology, just choice, commitment, and the courage to keep showing up even when everything says to run. The camera pulled back as darkness gathered four figures on a beach, a sand castle in the foreground, already beginning to blur with incoming tide waves washing away today's creation to make room for tomorrow's. Garrett thought his final thought, some wrong numbers aren't mistakes at all. They're fate wearing a disguise, waiting to see if you're brave enough to answer.